Hey everyone, it's Wade from Inversataski and 1632 Atari Podcast. Sometimes I need a break from all things Atari. So when I'm not shortcutting podcast research, flubbing a podcast recording, or mangling a podcast production, or playing an Atari game, I take my mind off Atari and listen to the SNES podcast.
Cut! He said cut!
How was that?
Good. You were not too far off in regards to bungling a podcast from start to finish.
At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your hosts, Soulblazer and George.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon where in the world that you are when you're listening to this podcast. I am Greg, joined as always by George.
Greg, who the heck is Gary Kitchen?
We're gonna talk about him in depth in this podcast, George. The better question is, why is his name on the game?
The better question is, why does it sound like he's a chef?
Because Kitchen's a very common last name.
Is it?
Yeah, if I got a high
okay.
Yeah, like I had a high school teacher like was named Kitchen.
Okay, I've never heard of that last name before, but maybe it's just me.
But yes, we're covering a game that I have some history and some nostalgia for. Gary Kitchen's Super Battletank War in the Gulf, which came out for the Super NES, like any other systems, back in 1992. So, George, this is your first time playing this game, I think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would have heard of Gary Kitchen if I played this before.
Well, Gary Kitchen's had a long career, which we'll get into here in a minute. I'm sure you played like one of his other games before in the past, but
maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. If you have a list of games, I'm willing to hear them. Okay,
I do, but this game is a simulation game that his name implies has you commanding a tank. In this case, like an M1 Abrams tank during the Gulf War back in 1991. It's simulation. It's not. I don't think it's heavy simulation, but my definition of sim and your definition of sim may be two different things. As we talked about, before with a different game, like before the recording. So, to me, this game is sim, but it's not like pure sim. There are some action aspects to it.
Is it like The Sims? I'm sorry, that was a bad joke. I'll just shut up for the next rest of the podcast.
No, it wasn't a horrible joke, actually, and actually, I think this game probably has as much action as actually this one, like as The Sims does. So,
can I set myself on fire from trying to cook? That's my favorite part.
You can get yourself exploded very easily, like in a real fire.
Well, I guess that's good enough. Can I revive myself by getting into a violin battle with death?
You can do that?
In The Sims, you can.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forget which one. I don't know if it's all of them, but I know some of them you could do that. It's really interesting. Well, I mean, I guess that's what happens when you get yourself killed in The Sims.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, the objective in this game is not to get yourself killed. Like instead you want to do like a lot of killing yourself because I beg you have a tank, and this is war. So the objective is to shoot first and ask questions later. But
That's how I like to do it in video games, at least.
yes. This game's actually an improved version of the game which came out for the NES in 1990 that was called Battletank. And Super Battletank was developed by Imagineering and published by Absolute. Got a worldwide release, came out first in the US in 1992, followed by Europe and Japan, like Japan in 1993. And the game also got ported to the Genesis, the Sega Master Drive, like in the Game Boy.
Wait, what did you just say?
The Genesis, the Game Gear, like in the Game Boy.
I could have sworn you said the Master Drive.
I may have said that by accident, so...
That's why I asked, because I was really worried that my ears were wrong.
Well, that is the European name of the Genesis, right?
No, it's the Mega Drive.
Mega Drive, okay, yeah. All right, well...
We don't know anything about Sega on this podcast.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah,
that's for my other podcast, which I'm not going to shill, although I just brought it up, so why not, right? Right, Greg?
Yeah, exactly.
Master System Masterpieces. Okay, let's continue this podcast.
So the reason this game's called Super Battletank is because, like I said,
it is Super NES.
No, that's not the case. Like you may think it is, because this game also came out the Genesis, so they have the same name. So, no, it's called Super because it's an enhanced version like the NES game.
And then the N64 version had a 64 at the end.
No, there was no 64 version of this game. However, curiously enough, this game did get ported to port the Game Boy Advance 2003.
And then on the Wii, it had crappy motion controls.
They renamed the game for the GBA, though. It's called Operation Armored Liberty, like that system.
I don't know. That sounds like a worse title. Honestly, it sounds like and I know I'm comparing it to this title, which is weird, but like that title just sounds so stereotypical. You know what I mean?
They had to do it because a different company released it, so they had to change the name because of rights.
Well, that's understandable, but I just mean that they did it. They sat in a conference for 5 minutes, and they took the first thing they got. How about Operation Liberty or whatever? Okay.
And this game was also popular enough that it got a sequel, Super Battletank 2, which came out for the system like 2 years later. Like 1994.
Yes, and let's take 2 years until we cover that.
Actually, it's almost the same game. I mean, like, I was going to talk about it here a little bit at the end, but there's really not many differences between them.
Really?
But yeah,
I saw a little bit of footage of that. I was like, oh, okay, it actually looks better.
Yeah, the graphics are a little bit better. The storyline and missions are different. You're an M1A2 that time as opposed to being like an M1A1, but that was still handled by and developed by Gary Kitchen's team like an Absolute. So I did say that we're going to talk about Gary Kitchen some, but let's first talk about the companies involved, because we haven't talked about them like too much yet. The game was developed by Imagineering, like where Gary Kitchen was working for at the time. They were based in New Jersey. They were the in-house studio of Absolute Entertainment. Mostly active during the late 80s, during 90s. Their most famous games were like A Boy and His Blob, this game, the prequel Battletank, and the sequel to A Boy and His Blob, that was The Rescue of Princess Blobette. They also developed a bunch of games that were published by other companies such as Acclaim, Atari, Activision, High-Tech Expressions, Game Tech, and THQ.
Oh God, High-Tech Expressions.
Yes.
Oh God.
Yeah, they handled a lot of the game show games, and they also handled a lot of like the kid games, Sesame Street, Barbie, the works.
Yeah.
So Imagineering was around from 1986 to 1992, before they got folded into Absolute. Imagineering also did a bunch of games for a bunch of other systems too. They actually ported Commando to Commando like the 2600s. and Double Dragon and Ikari Warriors to that system, like to that system, the Atari 7800 like as well too. So.
Oh, that's really interesting. That
Yeah.
The Double Dragon on 2600. Oh man.
Yeah, that's rough.
It's rough, but like, I mean, there's not much you can do with that system,
No.
you know?
Yep. They also developed a bunch of the Simpsons games.
Oh no.
Yep.
Like on the NES?
Yes.
Oh no.
Like also the Game Boy.
I don't know much about the Game Boy ones.
Yeah, so they also did Swamp Thing like for the NES.
Oh no. Oh no.
And Ghostbusters 2, like the same system as well. So.
That's actually kind of an alright game.
Sorry, Imaginarium's track record is hit or miss. Some of their games are very good. So, Absolute was developed by some of the same people who had formed Activision back in the day. Gary Kitchen founded the company in 1986, along with his brother, Dan Kitchen. Soon joined by David Crane, Alex DeMille, and John Van Ryzen, who all had history producing games for consoles and computers like the time period. Rumor has it that the reason they call their company Absolute was because that Activision had purposely picked Activision had wanted to go with a name that would come up first before Atari back when they were formed, they'd come up first in the searches.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, like in the phone book. So when Absolute was formed, they took a page from the same strategy. So.
Right, I think that was the same thing for Acclaim as well, right?
Acclaim also, yep.
Yeah.
Absolute lasted till the third quarter of 1985. When they realized that the company was no longer being profitable, the profitable was shut down. And most people went over to a new company called Skyworks Technologies, which I think is still around today.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah. But so Absolute developed some games, but they were more of a publisher themselves. So, like I said, they published all of Imaginarium's games. They also published a bunch of other games for other companies, as well also. So. Yeah, not the biggest or most well-known company, but they did publish some very good games.
I definitely heard of them before.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So big enough.
Yeah. So Gary Kitchen, I was going to talk about here a little bit. Like I said before, he has a very long history in the video game industry, and is still one of the few people who's actually so active in it today, as a matter of fact.
So he's not a chef.
No.
Are you sure?
Absolutely sure.
Okay.
He was born in 1955 in Washington, D.C., and from an early age, he was very interested. Very interested, electronics. So his first real job while he was still in college, was for a company called Wickstead Design Associates in New Jersey. They were well known back then. They were the think tank / design group for a bunch of companies like Milton Bradley, Mattel, Hasbro, that kind of stuff. They would actually develop the idea and the games and toys there in house, and then actually license the rights to make that toy or whatever to for the company to publish under their own name. So you can primarily think of them as being like a think tank. The most well-known project that Gary Kitchen worked on there in 1979 was for one of the first and the most popular handheld pinball games, the Wildfire, which I had as a kid and absolutely loved. Have you heard of Wildfire before, George?
I have not.
Yeah. You should look up it online. It was a very well done handheld electronic pinball game. Very, very popular when it came out. So he graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson University in 1980, with BS in electrical engineering. And then he went on to also and then he went on to also help develop the handheld electronic game Bank Shot in 1982, which was one of the first pool simulation games. And both those games did very both those games they did very well, so I helped to get him like a name for himself. When he was with that company, also he like Wickstead, he started to design games for both the 2600, and also for the Commodore 64. Those early games were Space Jockey, Donkey Kong, the arcade port, Keystone Capers, and Pressure Cooker for the 2600s. And also several games from the C64 as well, which he had a hand in helping with. He helped David Crane, for example, in Ghostbusters, for the C64. So, and then he went on to 1986. But he joined Absolute. They helped to found a company, and he was there for a long time. 1995, he left them to join his longtime friend and business partner David Crane at Skyworks. And then Kitchen and Crane, they both sold their interest in Skyworks 2007. They left the company in 2009. And then after that, for 3 years, he was the vice president of game publishing for Viacom Media Networks. He also did some primarily working on mobile games of them. And since I think the company in 2012, this is interesting. He is now an independent technical expert in legal matters concerning video games and mobile app design, development, patent infringement, copyright infringement, general software development, video game industry history, and business issues.
Damn, we need more people like that.
Yeah. Well, in that role, he's been employed by and done work for such such big companies such as Nintendo, Sony, and Ubisoft.
Right.
So it's interesting. It's an interesting job to get for himself now. So, but list of games. I mentioned his early games. He also worked on the NES, Stealth ATF, A Boy and His Blob, Destination Earthstar, several of the Simpsons games. With the Super NES, he worked on Home Alone, both the Super Battletank games. Then also several mobile games. I never heard of most of these. Arcade Hoops, Basketball, Match 3 Poker, Skyscrapers, and so on. His last
Sounds
actual
terrible.
game, 2000. Yeah. His last game was 2011, but he's still technically in the business today. He may not be making games anymore, but he's still actually involved with the industry. And he's on the board of advisors, the National Video Game Museum, in Texas. So altogether, his actual game list, about 25 games.
Okay.
And there's not too many guys who have a history, as long diversified as he did. But by this point in the company, in Absolute, when this game came out, even though his name was on the game, and I'm not really quite sure why they felt the name to. I guess they felt the need to put his name on the game to help give it some recognition, the same way that Sid Meier's name still appears on games that he's worked on these days. But like Sid Meier, he didn't actually do any programming or actual work on the game itself. He was the actual producer, overseer of the project. He's the one who came up with who came up with the game idea. He oversee. He drew up the initial design for. He oversaw the team that actually programmed it. Because it's just like Sid. He doesn't actually. He didn't actually do any work on the game itself. Well, that's how the design world, of course, that is. I just said.
He put his name on the game. That's the work he did.
Yes.
Right.
Right. No, it wasn't just that. He did come up with the design for it. So, the idea for the game pretty much pretty much kind of wrote itself. I mean, like, there already been several PC games that come out since the Gulf War that kind of like recreated the war and some of the stuff you're doing in the like during the war and whatnot. So like creating a tank simulation game for the system kind of like the consoles kind of seemed like a no-brainer, and the game did review very well and sold very well when it came out. Hence the fact it got a sequel. So, but so gameplay itself, you're just as the name implies, you're actually like controlling a tank, and you're just trying to, and you've got 8 missions in the game total, and you're given an objective for the start of every mission, and then you actually like command the tank. You can use the control pad, like in the keys, to move the tank around and shoot your guns and weapons and whatnot, and you're just trying to destroy and you're just trying to achieve objectives like nobody can, like lose our tanks.
Well, you don't use the D-pad to move your tank around, so you use it to move the turret. But to move the whole tank, you use the shoulder buttons, and there's speed increase and a speed decrease, 2 different buttons.
Yep. And you can also like change the map mode too if you want to. So you can also like look around the map and see where your objective is, like where you need to like head to. Very, very handy.
Yeah.
Because in the desert there's no landmarks to help. So
it was really interesting when I realized that the map like wraps. So you can go from south to all the way north, and it was weird.
There's limitations.
Yeah, I mean, you would think maybe they would like put a border or something, but no, you just eventually when you go all the way down South Kuwait, you just end up in North Kuwait. It's a weird technology. This game was ahead of its time. It's going to predict the future of warfare. When soldiers are trying to leave and they're still in the battlefield, they'll just still be in the battlefield anyway.
Right. Well, I do want to mention a little bit about the M1A1 itself here, so you can kind of like compare how the tank actually is versus like how it's used in the game, because there are some differences. And that's what I said earlier. This game is mostly simulation, but they did make some allowances like for gameplay. And
I'm sure also due to hardware limitation as well.
Oh yeah, sure, exactly. So, the M1A1 came in service back in 1979. The main weapons the tank has is your like 105 millimeter main gun. And you also have most of the tanks also had a 50 caliber M2HB heavy machine gun and 2 7.62 millimeter lighter machine guns. So in this game, you have the main tank gun that you can use, but the machine guns were condensed just one heavy machine gun to make life easier for you. On road, these things go on road. These things are pretty fast. They can go up to 45 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's pretty good for a tank.
Yeah. Well, off-road 30 miles per hour. So that's not too bad either. So
no.
The tank requires a crew of 4 to command. There's the commander/machine gunner, who's actually in charge of the operations, making sure the tank does what it needs to do. He also operates the machine guns. There's the main gunner, who's responsible for actually firing the main gun. There's the loader, who's responsible for firing, responsible for actually prepping the shells. These are by the way depleted uranium shells that the tank uses, which is a very potent, powerful warhead that's designed to be able to punch through enemy armor from a couple miles out. And then there's also the driver, who's actually job is actually drive the tank. So obviously they combined all four crew functions like the one person this game. So
like they do with a lot of video games, even today.
Yep.
They do that. It's like I think one of them was Battlefield or whatever. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna hop in the tank. All right, now I'm doing all the controls, and it's like, yeah, if one person was trying to control all parts of the tank, man,
right,
that'd be insane.
Well, the main so the main reason they did that, I think, in this game was because of the hardware limitations, like you said before. Because
I don't think it's because of hardware limitations. I think it's just to make the game easier.
Well, partly, but then but as I'm saying, Microprose made a War in the Gulf tank simulator game for the PC around the same time, and you actually switched between every station in the tank, like in that game.
Oh wow! There's
yeah.
there are some games out there that have that simplicity of control where, like, you're one person doing everything, but inside your tank is a full crew, and your crew can actually become injured or actually die, and then you have other crew members like trying to take on other roles and everything, and it makes it harder. Your tank might not go as fast, or you might not be able to reload as quickly, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might be the best of both worlds there, where you don't have to keep swapping over to another character, but you also have that, like, quote-unquote simulation aspect of having a full crew.
Right. They also made the M1A, they also made the M1A1 tank in this game a lot harder than it is in real life, because in the game you can take 6 direct hits so your tank blows up. Whereas in real life, it couldn't take that many hits.
How many can those tanks take? Like,
it depends
2?
upon. Well, it depends upon what they're facing. Obviously, the U.S. government, we have the money and resources to be able to spend on pouring millions of dollars into R&D, and it shows like this tank. I mean, this tank was in development for good 7 years before it actually was approved for production, and they're not cheap to produce either. The M1A1 cost about $6.2 million to build each one. So, because of that, they're considered the M1A1 and its sequel, the M1A2, which came into service like 90s, which came into service several years later, 1996, and still used today. Because of that, they're very tough tanks. They're considered to be probably the best tanks in the world, right now. At least on par with some of the other, the German Leopard 2 and the Russian T-90. But in the Gulf War, they didn't take that much damage. I mean, there were some losses, but most of those losses were due to either accidents or friendly fire, which had happened a few times, unfortunately. But the main opposition they were facing were lower grade, older Russian-made T-60s and T-70s. And the M1A1 has not only has a long range, but the tank's also designed, and the game simulates this very well. The tank's also designed to be able to both move and shoot accurately at the same time, which is something that early tanks really couldn't do. You either could move or you could shoot, but you couldn't do both at the same time. So, in this game, mobility is key because you need to stay on the move a lot to be able to avoid enemy fire coming at you and that kind of stuff. So, and to kind of relate a point to what you mentioned earlier, George, one tank of gas gives the tank an operational range of 265 miles. So, you can imagine you're driving a long distance.
Right.
But I mentioned all that to kind of mention some of the sacrifices that they made as far as that went in this game for gameplay reasons. So and so most of those things I can agree with. The game still feels the game, at least to me, I think does a very fine job of describing the line between simulation simulation gameplay, because it does feel like you're commanding a tank, but it doesn't bog you down and the constant the countless screens of stats and data, or having switch stations or that kind of stuff. It does have a very particularly when you get to think of combat, it does have a very action feel to it.
Yeah.
So when you start the game, the opening briefing screen is a digitized picture, very, very good graphic. Like it's a very like a picture of the actual commander of the U.S. forces, like actually showing on the map, like the pointer, like where you're going to, and that kind of stuff. Very, very good graphics, like the Super NES, like right there.
Yeah, it certainly paints a picture.
Yes. Well, it's a digitized picture. The actual game graphics themselves are pretty good. I mean, they're typical early Super NES graphics. So as you mentioned earlier, George, they would be superseded by later games. But they get the job done. There is some. I mean, you're in a desert for the most part, so like the color choices are limited. But there's some good choice of colors. The actual display panel looks easy enough to read. I think it looks nice and functional. So the explosions are very nice.
Yeah, they go boom, and they light up the area, and they're pretty. Oh man, those enemy tanks, they like to run away.
They do, yes. So, just like in real life, the M1A1s were severely outnumbered, like in the Gulf War. Iraq had many more tanks in the area like the coalition forces did. So the M1A1 was always always outgunned, like outnumbered. It had to use its mobility and superior firepower to be able to to inflict its damage. And I think this game does a pretty good job simulating that.
Yeah, certainly a bunch of enemies.
So there's not too much to talk about, like in terms of music. You have the briefing music, the victory music, the defeat music, that kind of stuff. Like, it's fine. It sounds militarist. So, sound effects though, I think are very good.
They work. I didn't find myself sitting there and be like, wow, that's a really good explosion noise, or hey, that helicopter sound sounded good and it didn't annoy me at all. The helicopter sound actually was slightly annoying. Was it just me?
It's a little bit off, sure. But there is stereo sound used in this game to good effect. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah,
was I playing it? I might have been playing in mono for some reason.
Yep. Yeah, for example, if a helicopter flies across from left to right, you actually hear it going from left channel to right channel.
Huh. No, I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah. So you can use that. So sound effects can help you a little bit in getting guesstimate as to where the enemy is and how far off they are.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to see an early game like that use sound like that. I mean, I know modern games now are really into the sound, and now we have all this virtualization of different channels and everything, so you don't even have to get a specific sort of setup to hear any of that.
Right.
Because sound is a huge part of games. And
oh yeah, definitely.
Adding spatial awareness in a game like this, that's pretty cool.
So we talked about the controls a little bit already, like how you have to use the L and R buttons to actually turn the tank left or right. They're trying to simulate the rudder control style that the tanks use real life to actually control.
Hey, that's why they call it tank controls. I'm looking at you, Resident Evil.
I think they made a good choice with that. The control pad is used to move your weapon. You can change between your turret gun and the machine gun, like the select button. And then the main buttons can turn your tank left or right and speed it up or down. It takes a bit to get used to controls, but once you get the hang of it, that's pretty good, I thought.
Honestly, yeah, I agree. Honestly, the tank controls, the tank controls are pretty good. A lot of modern games like to just map the movement to the thumbstick, and it's
right.
No, that's terrible. Why would you do that? So using the shoulder buttons to turn around and using two different buttons for increasing and decreasing speed, that's pretty cool and feels much better than using a thumbstick, like I said. And
Yes.
on top of that, it feels nice for aiming as well. The only problem I have is, and maybe it's accurate to how tanks work, I don't know, but I had to get used to the inverted y-axis, because down is up and up is down, and I'm only used to that for planes, because that makes sense to me, because I don't know, I guess I know about planes, but I don't know about tanks. So it felt you know what it was. It felt more like a cursor than a tank turret to me. Did you have that feeling? Because you have that like cursor. I for lack of a better name, you have the cursor, which is the reticle.
Right.
Basically for aiming the turret or the barrel, whatever you want to call it. And honestly, it felt more like a cursor to me. So I think that's why the inverted axis felt just really odd to me.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if tanks use an inverted axis or not. I do know that the actual targeting system in tanks is a lot more complicated than it is here, obviously, so they're trying to find some way to simplify it, and I kind of think that the cursor-like movement was probably the best compromise that the designers felt they could make with it.
Yeah, but other than that, yeah, everything was pretty good.
And you need to master and you really need to master the controls too, because later on in the game, when it gets much harder, you need to be able to both turn and move at the same time, because that's going to become critical to your survival.
Certainly, yeah. I think even the using the select button to change your weapons and everything was a nice choice too.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like if it was some other developers, they'd probably like make it start or something for some weird reason. I feel like they could have done a better job with the map though. I mean, like, the map's fine. The map does what it does, and it does it well enough, but I feel like maybe you could have made it like a map/pause menu situation, so like maybe you could have assigned B to something, like maybe like B could have been like a shortcut for like the smoke instead of having to select it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, yeah. Personally, I agree with you. I also think I know why they chose to do that, because again, they're trying to simulate. Like I said, like I said before, these tanks actually have a crew of 4. I think, and I think they want to try to simulate all 4 of these things happening at the same time, like it would be in a real tank, and keep it like real time, because they're trying to put you like under the gun, like, per se.
How about the map, Greg? What kind of future technology is that map where it shows where you are and the enemies are?
It was fairly accurate because the scouting, during the war, because this, we had in-depth intelligence thanks to spy planes and satellites and whatnot as to where the enemy positions were. And it's also important to keep in mind that the ground war phase of the Gulf War was very short. It was very short. It was just 100 hours. That's all it took. It's all it took to force the collapse of most of the Iraqi army and get the surrender. And it's all, and the whole game takes place during that same 100 hours too. So, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the map's showing where the enemies still are, because at most 3 days have passed and that's it.
I'll be honest, I don't know much about the Gulf War.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting conflict to look into, because it was like a perfect execution in some ways of like a modern warfare, and being able to use an outgunned but superior fighting force in the coalition's forces, particularly the U.S. forces, and attacking and destroying a much larger but much less inferior trained and inferior weapon, equipped Iraqi army. Because the ground troops were obviously very important, but it was the tanks that were the spear line. The tanks are the first ones to go in, because they're the ones who had to clear the way of the ground troops to actually move in and take their objective. So speed in real life and also in this game is critical, because you're trying to get your stuff as fast as possible. And the fact that, and again, like I said, 100 hours. The whole game takes place in a very, very short period of time. So, I'm okay with the map showing that stuff, because it's like, they're probably they're probably still there. Or you can also just say like spy satellites or whatever. So
I was just trying to make a joke.
well, but it was a good joke.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Thank you.
But there was also like a real reason for it too. So I was just trying to like point that out. But and like and you learned pretty quickly, George. I'm sure the differences between your turret and gun, the gun and which ones used like which targets, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, with experience of games and games and tanks in games. Yeah, let's play some games in this tank, boys. No, with experience with tanks in games, I already had a good understanding of the weapons and everything. This one is for like tanks, and this one's more suited for helicopters, and this one's more for infantry or whatever.
Yeah, you actually can use the main gun against helicopters if they're low enough.
Oh,
but
it's really hard.
Yeah, it's a lot easier like to use the gun.
Right. I actually I wound up using the machine gun turret for those helicopters.
Yes, that's the preferred way to do it.
Well, you have the other one. I forget what it is, but there's one that literally just locks on and hits it.
Well, you're also facing like scud launchers just like in the game too. So.
I just blasted that with the main turret.
Yeah, they're fairly easy, but they
don't really do anything to you as far as I've seen. You just roll up to them and you could have a conversation if you wanted.
Well, because they're aimed to attack other targets. They're not aimed to attack you. So
right. That's why you can sit there and have a conversation.
But oftentimes the mission when your objectives like will be to take out like X number like scud launchers.
Right.
Yeah, and later on in the game, the maps get bigger, and you also have to like drive for the distances. So they also like open up what they call like reviewing bases. We actually where we go to the base, they get like resupplied.
Right.
And I think you get repaired there too. I'm trying to remember.
That's a good question because I always found myself either I don't know what that was, either completing the mission or dying. So dying, just getting destroyed, dismantled, I don't know, whatever it is. Losing.
Yeah, the game gets tough like very early, I think.
Yeah, it does. Also, I hate to be honest here, but it also gets very tedious too.
I could see that a little bit. I wouldn't call it tedious because I enjoy games. Enjoyed games this type.
Oh, I like simulation games too, but this game just, I don't know, it just got boring for me.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna understand that because, of course, they do a good job recreating what the tanks are actually doing in the war, but what they're doing in the war was like war in real life is tedious. So I kind of think maybe they pushed the simulation line a little bit too far with that because pretty much you're doing the same things in each mission. It's just like you're doing like more of those things.
Right.
But for example, mission 1, you just have to go in flank for like 3 tanks. Mission 2, you have to take out 5 tanks like in a scud launcher. Mission 3, you have to destroy 2 tanks, 4 helicopters, and a scud launcher. You're just doing the same things over and over again. You're just doing like more of those things. So, I don't agree with that, but I just certainly can understand how somebody can say the game is tedious as you go through the game. But the main complaint I would have the main complaints I would have with this game is the difficulty spike is a little bit unnatural. I think the game gets a little bit too hard, a little bit too early, especially like 8 missions. But because as a kid, I could never get past mission 5 because the game gets pretty darn tough at that point.
Oh, it certainly does. It ramps up so quickly, and it just I wish it didn't, honestly. But I guess that's what adds time to the game is the difficulty.
Right. Of course, yes, but it would have been nice also, like if they could have programmed in a little bit more a little bit more additional units. For example, like maybe like actually like seeing some of your allies around you, so you don't like not feel like not feel like the only American unit like in the whole 100 miles.
Yeah.
Because you feel very alone and outgunned out there.
But you could be the ultimate war hero after you're done.
Well, again, the designers made a choice. Made a choice in that factor to go more toward gameplay. But, yeah, I mean, they mentioned Allied forces like in their briefings, but you never see anybody.
Right. They're just like 1 mile outside of the border that you have. That's what it is, Greg. Because when you try to get close enough, they just say, poof, nope, you're on the other side now.
Because in many ways, the Gulf War was called the first video game wars. Like, I think it's kind of like a fitting that you're actually commanding a tank in a video game simulation like of the conflict. So there's a kind of poetic justice to that,
I guess.
But I would say, however, that I wish the missions. I wouldn't say it's tedious. I think I wish the missions had a bit more diversity to them. I mean, like, a lot
of them are like the same thing. Go destroy these things, and then you're a cool guy and you win. Yay!
Maybe it had like one mission like we had to go scouting, or another mission we had to rush to the aid like an attack unit, like how to defend them. But just a little bit like a variety in the missions that could have been nice. Because
how about a mission where you become friends with the enemy, and then you have a tea party?
Well, there were reports of hundreds of soldiers surrendering at once, like en masse to a tank. So I guess
there you go. You can have the tea party in the tank.
Yeah, because
watch those controls. No, don't push that. That shoots the gun. Whoosh.
Yeah, because morale of many parts of the Iraqi army was not very good. So, so they certainly could have en masse surrenderings like that. That'd be kind of cool. But as a simulation, I think the game does that. I think the game strikes a pretty good balance in the end, like the end between simulation and gameplay, especially for like an early Super NES game.
Right. Do you think it would be too much? Do you think it would take too many resources to add in a system where not just the tank just as a whole gets damaged, but different systems take damage, like the treads and this and that, and the barrel?
Well, again, the PC simulation games have that.
Right.
I think they chose to leave that out here because of simplicity reasons and also because of resources. So, I'm sure later games could have handled that. But could the Super NES have handled that like this game? Yeah, probably. But the programmers just constantly chose not to go that direction
because it was kind of like a shooting gallery on wheels. You know what I mean?
It does have that. Yeah, it does have that feel in some parts. But again, the reports about that actually happening in the war. So it's like. The programmers were trying to find, we're trying to strike that very difficult balance between gameplay and sim. So
right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if there is a right answer to that question because it all depends upon the mindset of the people who are programming it. What aspects that they want to emphasize over others.
Right.
Because you only had so much memory and card space to work with. So, I like most of the decisions they made in this game. Like I said before, diversity of missions and being able to have the tank take damage in parts as opposed to just 6 hits and you're dead. Would certainly have been better realistic system, but but what it is, it's fine. So
yeah, it does what it does.
And this game is popular enough, like I said, to spawn a sequel a couple years later. A couple years later, Super Battletank 2. Some of those complaints they did address in that game. I don't have the history of that game as I did with this one, but I do know that game. I believe that game you do take damage in parts.
Okay.
Like compared to this game. That game takes place in a fictional conflict. They were going back to the Gulf to deal with Iraq again, which would happen in real life eventually, but they didn't know that back then. So, you're in the better version of the tank, the M1A2 that time. So, a little bit faster, a little bit tougher, like a little bit firepower's a bit heavier, that kind of stuff. Missions. The basic gameplay is essentially the same. The graphics sound effects are improved some. So, if you enjoy this game, go play the sequel because it's like more of the same.
Spoilers. I didn't really.
The sequel is probably better. The sequel is probably better than this game. I just haven't spent. Like I said, I just don't have the history like of that game. So I can't really. I'm not prepared to offer a qualified opinion on that subject at this point.
I found this game more interesting than fun.
How so?
Because it was interesting to see how a simulation game would be on the SNES, especially like a tank simulation, and I want to see how all the systems worked and everything. And it's for what it is, it's pretty in depth, relative to what they were able to do and whatnot. But
sure.
like I said, I just didn't find it that fun. It was kind of just tedious.
I did take a look at some of the other ports of the game.
I saw the Genesis version, and it was pretty cool.
Genesis version plays almost the exact same Super NES.
Right.
Actually, the Game Boy and Game Gear versions still play the same too, despite the fact that despite the required scale down to the graphics of the game screen size.
Right.
Which is pretty impressive, like all things considered, I think.
Yeah, I didn't take a look at those, but I might have to.
Yeah. And Battletank and the NES I never played, but I imagine this game is just an improved version of that.
Yeah, I saw some screenshots of that, and I was like, oh, I didn't know, and that looks pretty
the
interesting.
graphics are very good in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so. And there really were not too many tank games available in Super NES, so.
No, I can't even think of any right now.
There were some other games that had you in tanks as part of the game, but the whole game wasn't focused around tank combat like this one in the sequel is.
Right.
So, but so yeah, like it's a very unique game. Like if you enjoy tank games, if you enjoy simulation games, I think this game's like worth checking out. I'm sorry that I'm sorry that you didn't have like too much fun with it, but I think it's a very interesting game, at least to look at for some of the things they tried, like whatnot.
Certainly, like I said, what I saw was interesting, and I wanted to see how everything was done, and honestly, like a lot of it was done pretty well. Just the problem was the gameplay, because it just gets so tedious, and it's basically the same thing over and over again, but with more and more enemies.
Right. Oh, I do have here a little bit of information. I forgot. I did write down a little. Did write down a little bit more information here about the sequel. Some of the things they add to it, and maybe this is some of the things that you've. And some of the stuff actually does address some of the complaints you're talking about there, George. The game's bigger. There's 16 missions. You're able, besides the infantry and scud and tanks and scud carriers that the original game had, you also get to attack APCs and jeeps. Like that one as well. You also like the tank in real life, have a smoke screen available that you can use like every now and then to make yourself like invisible to enemy radar.
Well, that was in the first game.
It was, but it's done a lot better like in the sequel because because it works better. Because it works better than that one. You can also summon airstrikes. airstrike like that game to attack attack difficult targets for you.
That's cool.
There are 2 secrets in this game that are things you can do to give you a small edge. And
Can you play as Gary Kitchen?
No.
Dang.
I probably should have mentioned this to you earlier, George. Sorry about that. But there's a way to be able to move around the tank. There's a way to make your tank move around, you move around the game. The game world faster. You can switch your. But you may figure this out because it's not really that much of a secret. Just drive the tank in map mode instead. Your tank moves faster in terms of actual going across the map from point A to point B, like when the map mode is as opposed to being like in the first person view mode.
I actually figured that out, and also noticed that they slow you down when you're near an enemy,
which is good.
Yeah, it is good. You know what? There's one thing I didn't try, but have you tried ramming some of the tanks? Can you do that?
No, I've never tried that. I suspect it doesn't do any damage.
Okay.
And it's probably not recommended.
Probably not. It'd probably shoot you much easier.
Right. There's a trick in the game you can do though to make it a bit easier to use your machine gun though. If you notice your machine gun shells are hitting the enemy, you see the crosshairs like flashing red to indicate the charge of the machine gun actually are hitting them. Pause the game. Due to a bug in the game, and this happens in other games too, by the way. If the object's red, which means taking damage when you pause the game, the damage would keep going on.
Oh, so it's Mega Man.
Yep. Exactly. So.
Man, that's a crazy way to cheat the system right there.
Yeah, only works machine gun though.
Interesting.
So, yeah, small little bug they didn't catch. But, it happens. So anyway, I pretty much have already said my final thoughts on this game. Does it hold up today? Yeah, kind of.
It depends on who you are.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit slow, it's a bit clunky in some places, I think. There are better... There obviously are better tank simulator games that are out there nowadays. But for what it is, in the system that's on, it's pretty good. I think.
Right.
Whether or not you enjoy it, like I said, depends upon what you enjoy. Like, if you like tanks, if you like simulation games, by all aspects of everything I've seen here, the sequel that looks like a better game, which is sometimes the case. They're able to take what worked in the first game and improve upon it. So, what I find really strange, like the fact this game got a worldwide release. I can understand it coming out in Europe because several European countries use the M1A1, and European countries did fight in the Gulf War. But Japan, this game came out.
I mean, they like American stuff too.
Yeah, I suppose, but
they want to be American and be in American tanks and play American boys. That's my favorite game.
Which one?
American Boys.
Don't think I've heard of that one.
I just made it up.
Oh, okay. So because the game was very popular, it's pretty cheap to get these days, like on eBay. 130 copies of the game were currently listed when I looked several days ago. 51 copies I've recently sold. Card only, these prices include shipping. Prices of this game ranging from $4.50 to $13.75. So, yeah, not that bad. CIB is very cheap. CIB is very cheap also, $13 to $14.50.
That's not too bad.
No.
Yeah,
and the game complete also came with a poster, which is very nice looking.
Yay! I like posters.
I used to love getting posters in games back then.
Oh man, I think all the Master System games, if you get one actually complete in box, they all come with those posters. It was like
yeah, a lot of
it was like the Atari stuff, kind of.
yeah, a lot of the NES, Super NES games that came with posters too.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
the Koei games all had posters. ActRaiser had a nice one. Like I remember ActRaiser like having one. There were several other games that came with one too. Populous came with one, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah, I only got the cart, so.
Yeah. So, but so yeah, $450. Yeah, it's worth it. I think.
As long as it's not 450.
No. A sealed copy of one existed probably go for a good price, but then of course
Probably
all
not
sealed games go for like a pretty
though.
good price. No, but you know, like I said, this game because this game was so popular, like so cheap. Because this game is so popular, it is so cheap. Sorry, let me try that again. That's what I was trying to say. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it was fun. So yeah, it was fun going back to this game after all these years. Holds up pretty well, I think, for the most part. It's not quite as fun now as it was back then, I think, but then that could be said for a lot of older games. So I'm curious to check out the. Yeah, I'm also curious. I'm also curious to check out the check out the GBA versions. See how that one like holds up.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I don't know. It's not like I have a podcast pushing me to play GBA games, so I don't have to worry about that.
There's no Game Boy podcast out there, unfortunately. There should be one.
No, Greg, I'm not doing another podcast. I can hear you winking at me.
No, I'm not winking at you. I'm winking at everybody else out there. But that's also a huge library too. So.
Oh, dude, yeah. There's a lot of RPGs on there too.
A lot of good RPGs.
Yeah, and there's also the Pokemon games.
Yep. Pokemon pretty much saved the Game Boy.
Did it?
Yeah, the Game Boy. Yeah, Nintendo really dragged their feet in releasing a color version of the system, and because Nintendo, they don't want to release anything for technology until it actually gets to the point where it's actually like cheap and affordable, and then they can produce it en masse without taking a loss on it. So
yeah. That's what they did with the Switch, and the Switch is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
They did things to kind of hurt the Switch a little bit to keep the cost down, such as like limiting the amount of memory the system has and whatnot. So, which I understand.
So I was just thinking, if there was a Game Boy podcast, would it be called the Game Boy by Game Boy podcast?
Could be.
All right, I'll escort myself out.
So yeah, that's Super Battletank in a nutshell. You have any final thoughts about the game, George?
It's interesting, and I'm saddened to know that Gary Kitchen is not a chef who likes tanks.
Nope. Well, if it makes you feel better, I did mention that Gary Kitchen did some Atari 2600 games. One of them game he made for Activision was a game called Pressure Cooker.
Yes, I know that game.
Very very unique game. You actually play short order cook in that game. We have to make hamburgers as fast as make hamburgers to customer specifications as fast as possible. So
are you saying
Kitchen
it's Gary Kitchen's pressure cooker?
Could be, yep. So you can imagine that you're playing as Kitchen in that game if you want to, I suppose.
I'm imagining that. I'm imagining a world where that game was one of the most popular games, and they just released an actual pressure cooker just called Gary Kitchen's pressure cooker. And it's just a popular model, and people actually look on eBay to buy them for cheap because they're not made anymore, but they're the best pressure cooker in the world.
Yeah, pressure cookers are very fun games, highly underrated.
Also, pressure cookers are a nice thing to have. Pressure cooker your meat. It's tasty.
The music in that game also makes it very catchy.
You know what? I think I just got the title. Pressure cooker. You're under pressure and you're a cooker. I just got
Exactly.
it. I just got it. That's not even a joke. I just got it now.
Keystone Capers is also like one of my favorite games of all time on that system. That's a fun game.
Yeah, but you're not cooking things. And you're not Gary Kitchen. Come on, you're telling me Gary Kitchen wouldn't sound like a person who would be on TV cooking stuff? Hi, I'm Gary Kitchen. Today we're gonna cook a turkey. No? Should this be in the podcast? Should this just be B-roll? What is this?
Well, he is still doing gaming conventions. You could always go to one and ask him.
Ask him why he isn't a chef. Just be the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, we were saying before the podcast that he's actually at the Midway. Midway. Yeah, I'll be okay. The
who?
Midwest. Midwest, what I'm trying to say. Midwest Gaming Convention this weekend.
Oh, the Midway Gaming Convention. Yeah, we're all celebrating how Midway's gone.
Yeah, at least Midway games are still being published by various companies, so.
Yeah.
But anyway,
they're not gone forever. They're still here in spirit.
Yep. Yep. As long as their games, as long as their games are still being released, they're still around. So. Anyway, I think we've covered this pretty much as much as we can here. As always, we appreciate your support and your support of the podcast very, very much. We're a proud member of both the Retro Junkies Throwback Network, where we can find a whole bunch of other retro-themed podcasts, both gaming and non-gaming related. If you have any questions, feedbacks, comments, etc., you can contact us Facebook page, or you can also email me directly if you want to at the Super NES Podcast at the SNEspodcast@yahoo.com. George, what game did you pick for us to cover next?
Sunset Riders.
Yes, a great game. I'm surprised we haven't covered that one yet.
Yeah, I was surprised too when I looked through the back catalog of this podcast.
Great arcade game by Konami. Ported very well to the system, I thought.
We'll see.
Yep. So, anyway, George. So, where can we find you at? If somebody is so inclined.
Oh boy! Well, I do a podcast where we cover Super Nintendo games. That one's called the SNES Podcast. Don't know if you've heard of it, but yeah, we cover Super Nintendo games there. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter. That's at Mr. Chief. That's at MISTURCHEEF. But if you want to listen to some more podcast gold, as I'm sure this episode was, Greg and I also do PlayStation Power, a PlayStation 2, and PlayStation Portable podcast. We cover those games and have fun, and sometimes we say bad things, so don't have kiddies nearby. That's my way of saying it's not family friendly. But anyway, I also do Master System Masterpieces, which Greg will be on soon enough. Actually, next episode, eventually. Which is soon enough. And yeah, we're gonna cover a fun game there too. That's about it for me.
Okay, sounds good. Let me finish this podcast like a final thought. I do appreciate very much. I appreciate very much the dedication that the game has. The beginning scenes, how they dedicate the game to the men and women who actually fought in the Gulf War. Because,
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
because fighting the war in a game is fun. Fighting in real life is not.
No, it's not.
So support the veterans. So thank you, and everybody out there who served. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for the people serving now, especially what's going on.
Yes, that's
Yeah, that's
also
rough.
very true.
That's rough.
So thank you again for everybody out there for your support, and we'll catch you again next time.
See ya.
Take care.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man. Now you're playing with power.